There are moments in life when silence cuts sharper than words. The evening he told me, without saying it directly, without even looking at me fully, I understood what was coming long before my brain allowed the words to form. It was written in his posture, in the way he folded into himself, in the way the air thickened between us. He didn't want me to be his father anymore. He wanted someone else to take that place. Parenthood was never about perfection for me. It was about presence, being there through scraped knees, failed exams, sleepless nights when nightmares crept in. I had thought that was enough, that love could outweigh my flaws. But when a child grows, they start to measure love differently, not only in memories, but in comparisons, and I had lost that unspoken competition. His stepfather was steady, dependable in ways I had always struggled to be. Where I wavered, he held firm. Where I brought chaos, he brought routine. And children crave structure the way lungs crave air. It wasn't hard to see why my son gravitated toward that stability. Still, knowing it didn't soften the wound. The first cracks had appeared months earlier, subtle but insistent. He stopped calling me with small updates, stopped asking for advice on trivial things. His laughter with me felt forced, like an echo rehearsed. I noticed how he lingered longer when his stepfather was around, how his eyes followed him with unguarded trust. At first I told myself it was good, better that he had more than one man he could rely on. But deep inside, I felt the slow erosion of my role. When the truth arrived, it wasn't shouted or argued. It was whispered in the stillness of an ordinary evening, when the television buzzed low and dishes sat unwashed in the sink. He asked me to sign away my rights, to let another man become his father, not just in practice, but in name. I remember the hum in my ears drowning out the rest of the room, the way my body numbed as if bracing for a collision. It's a strange kind of grief, mourning someone who is still alive, someone you can still touch, but who has chosen to place you among the dead. I wanted to shout, to remind him of all the moments that tied us together, but something inside me froze. Children don't owe their parents devotion. Love cannot be demanded, only offered, and when it is rejected, it curdles into a void no words can fill. I began to notice the house differently after that night. Shadows stretched longer in corners. The photographs on the walls seemed to watch me with judgment, each frame a frozen reminder of a bond already dissolving. I caught myself avoiding mirrors because the face that looked back carried too much failure. And yet, beneath the grief, something darker stirred. It wasn't just that he wanted another father, it was the insistence that I vanish entirely. Not a secondary role, not a place on the sidelines, but absence, erasure, as though my existence itself had become an intrusion in his life.
The documents arrived a week later, legal pages crisp and clinical, each line spelling out my removal. I held the papers in trembling hands, the ink blurring as tears gathered. Signing them would be more than surrender. It would be a declaration that I no longer belonged, that another man's bloodless claim could overwrite years of flesh and memory. But it wasn't just legal language that haunted me. It was the sense of orchestration, as though the decision had not been fully his own. I noticed how his stepfather's gaze lingered when he thought I wasn't watching, calm but cold, patient in the way predators wait for prey to weaken. Nights grew heavier. I dreamed of my son standing at the foot of my bed, not as the boy I had raised, but as a hollow version. Face blurred, voice replaced by whispers. In the dream, he handed me a pen, urging me to sign, and when I refused, his features melted into someone else's, a stranger's smile carved into familiar skin. I would wake drenched in sweat, my pulse frantic, only to find the house utterly still, as if holding its breath. There were moments when I convinced myself it was only grief playing tricks on me, that the horror was an invention of a mind unraveling under loss. But then I would catch glimpses, his reflection in the window, not quite aligned with his body, his laughter in the kitchen carrying an undertone too sharp, too practiced. One evening, while he slept on the couch, I walked closer, studying him in the dim glow of the television. His breathing was steady, but it had no rhythm. like the slow mechanical rise and fall of something imitating life. My chest constricted with a thought I dared not fully hold. What if the boy who wanted me gone was no longer the boy I had raised at all? Grief bleeds into horror easily. When love is denied, the mind seeks darker explanations. And so I began to wonder, had I lost my son to choice? Or had something taken him from me, wearing his voice, guiding his hand to sign away my place? The line between parental failure and something unearthly blurred, and as the shadows lengthened in the corners of my house, I found myself more afraid of the silence that followed him than of the request he had made. Because silence, I realized, was not absence. Silence was watching, and every night it pressed closer.
The dreams returned, heavier this time. In them, my son stood at the edge of the bed, eyes vacant, holding out the pen, but behind him, in the shadows, another figure loomed, broad-shouldered, calm, his face obscured. The pen pressed closer, and I would wake with the taste of iron in my mouth. I tried to ground myself in routine, work, errands, anything that kept me away from the house. Yet, no matter where I went, I carried the sense of being followed. Reflections in shop windows seemed delayed, my own face blinking out of rhythm. Once I caught sight of my son's reflection beside mine. Though he wasn't with me, he was supposed to be at school. The line between grief and madness blurred. Perhaps this was the punishment for failure, to see demons where there were none, to drown in paranoia while everyone else lived peacefully. And yet, small details kept me tethered to suspicion. His handwriting, once messy and sprawling, had become neat, clinical, every letter shaped the same. His voice had lost the cracks of adolescence, becoming too even, too controlled. The night I found the list, everything changed. It was a scrap of paper tucked into one of my books, not in my handwriting. At first, I thought it was a school note he had misplaced, but as I read, my stomach hollowed. It was a list of names, mine, my parents, relatives. Next to each, a series of marks, circles and slashes. At the bottom, 2 words written in deliberate strokes: sever ties. I stared at the paper until my vision blurred. The handwriting was his, yet not his. The neatness was unfamiliar, the precision unsettling. I felt as though I was holding a fragment of instructions, not a note. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, waiting. Hours passed in silence until I heard it. Faint whispering from down the hall. Not voices exactly, but the rhythm of words, low and layered, as though spoken by more than one mouth at once. I followed the sound until I reached his room. The door was slightly open, and through the gap, I saw him sitting on the floor, back straight, eyes open, staring at nothing. His lips moved in sync with whispers that did not belong to him. I froze, unable to breathe. The whispers swelled, layered with tones I couldn't place, too deep, too fractured. His eyes flicked toward the door, and in that instant, I felt something heavy press against me, as though the air itself had weight. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and when I dared look again, the room was silent. He lay in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady, as though nothing had happened. The next morning, the list was gone.
I began to believe that the request to sign away my rights wasn't just legal, it was ritual, a severing, demanded not by law but by something older, something hungrier. The stepfather's calm smile, the vacant silence of my son, the whispers in the dark, all of it pointed to a truth I wasn't ready to face. The papers remained on my desk, waiting. Every time I touched them, my skin prickled as though the pages were alive, urging me towards surrender. My signature wouldn't just remove me from his life, it would hand me over, body and memory, to whatever had already taken him. And yet, the weight of his absence grew unbearable. Love makes fools of us, makes martyrs of parents. The thought of losing him completely gnawed at me until I wondered if surrender might at least preserve some part of him, even if that part was already gone. But each time I thought of signing, the whispers returned in memory. The way his lips had moved, not with his own words, but with something borrowed. The way the stepfather's shadow stretched too long across the floor, as though it belonged to someone larger. It wasn't adoption. It was replacement. And I was next.
By the third week, the house no longer felt like mine. I moved through it like a stranger trespassing into his own life, careful not to disturb whatever had claimed it. My son's presence was there, but hollowed, like a room stripped of furniture, yet still carrying the scent of what once filled it. The documents remained untouched, though they seemed to breathe when I passed them, the envelope curling as though warmed from within. I avoided my desk, but it didn't matter. The pressure followed me everywhere, a constant reminder that my erasure was not a possibility, but an inevitability. My son avoided me now, more openly than before. He spent hours with his stepfather, their whispers carrying through the walls in tones I couldn't quite distinguish. At first, I thought it was simply the murmur of bonding, but soon the sounds became layered, fractured, as though more than two voices spoke, each weaving in and out of the other. Sometimes I pressed my ear to the wall and the words didn't sound like words at all. They sounded like instructions. One night, the whispers reached a crescendo. The walls trembled with vibration, my chest tightening as though air itself was resisting me. I stumbled toward his room, compelled by something I couldn't name. The door was ajar, and inside I saw them both, my son and his stepfather, kneeling on the floor, a notebook open between them. The pages glowed faintly, symbols pulsing like veins. They didn't look at me, not even when I gasped. Their eyes were locked on the pages, lips moving in perfect synchrony. The light flickered, stretching shadows that writhed across the walls. For one terrible moment, I saw my own face sketched among the symbols, drawn with such precision it stole my breath. Lines marked across my features, measurements dissecting me into pieces. I fled before they could turn. Sleep abandoned me after that. I stayed awake for nights in a row, too afraid of what dreams would bring. My body grew weak, my mind fragile, but still I resisted. Signing the papers no longer felt like surrender, it felt like an invitation, the final step in a ritual already in motion. The breaking point came quietly. One evening, my son entered my room without knocking. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light, and for the first time in weeks, he met my eyes. There was no anger, no grief, only calm inevitability. He set the envelope on my desk, then placed a pen beside it with deliberate care. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The message was clear. It was time. When he left, the air in the room remained heavy, as though he had carried something inside with him and left it behind. The silence pressed close, whispering against my skin. I reached for the pen, my hand trembling, and for one terrible moment, I almost did it, almost signed my own disappearance. But then, in the corner of the room, I saw movement. A photograph had slipped from the wall, one of the few still left from years past. My son, younger, with frosting smeared across his cheeks, his laughter frozen in genuine joy. The sight pierced me, reminding me of the boy I had known, the boy who had once clung to me in thunderstorms, whose tiny hand had fit perfectly in mine. That boy was gone, but he had existed, and I could not let whatever had taken him decide the terms of my erasure. I tore the envelope open and scattered the papers across the floor. The symbols etched into the margins pulsed faintly, glowing in the dim light. My heart thrashed as I realized these were not ordinary documents. They were written as much in code as in law. Each line of legal jargon was threaded with marks, sigils woven between the words. Signing them wouldn't just give up custody, it would bind me to something I could not fight. Rage, grief, and terror collided inside me. I grabbed the pages and shoved them into the fireplace. The paper resisted at first, curling without burning, the ink shimmering like metal. But as the flames took hold, a low sound filled the room, a guttural hum vibrating through the walls. My son's voice echoed down the hallway, layered with tones not his own, calling out in a language that scraped against my skull. The fire roared, consuming the pages, the glow of the symbol stretching like veins across the walls before fading into ash. When it was done, the silence returned, but it wasn't relief. It was absence. I stumbled into the hallway, calling for him. His room was empty. The bed was neatly made, untouched. The window stood open, curtains swaying in the night breeze. The stepfather's room was empty too, no trace of either of them left behind. It was as though they had never existed. In the days that followed, I searched everywhere, schools, neighbors, even the police. But records blurred, memories faltered. People looked at me with confusion when I asked about my son. His name, once sharp in their minds, slipped away like water through fingers. It was as though he had been erased not just from my life, but from reality itself. Only I remembered. Only I carried the weight of him, the echo of his laughter, the shadow of his absence. At night, I still hear the whispers, faint, behind the walls, beneath the floor. Sometimes I wake to find new symbols scrawled on scraps of paper scattered across the house, written in that same precise hand. And sometimes, in mirrors or dark windows, I catch glimpses of him, not the boy I raised, but the hollow version, watching, waiting. I don't know what they wanted from me fully or why they needed me to sign those papers, but I know this. My refusal changed nothing. They have already taken him. They may come for me next. And if they do, I can only hope that someone, somewhere, will still remember that once he was mine.
The papers sat untouched on my desk for days, their presence like a weight pressing against my chest. I would walk past them, pretending not to see, but my eyes always caught the edge of the envelope, white and sharp like bone. Each time I considered opening it again, the room seemed to darken, as though the house itself disapproved. I told myself that ignoring them bought me time, but time did nothing except fester. The silence between my son and me stretched wider. He moved through the house like a guest, polite but distant, always leaning toward the orbit of his stepfather. At the dinner table, his eyes never lingered on me. When he laughed, it was brief and measured, as though laughter itself had to be rehearsed. I started to doubt my own memories. Photographs on the shelves showed birthdays, school plays, messy hair, and crooked smiles. But when I tried to summon the sound of his laughter from those moments, the details slipped away, replaced by the hollow echo of the present. It felt as though the boy I remembered had been swallowed by something that wore him like a mask. I wanted to confront him, to ask outright if this decision was truly his, or if someone had whispered it into his ear until it felt like his own thought. But each time I approached, the words died on my tongue. He would look at me with an expression too calm, too empty, like he already knew the question and had rehearsed the absence of an answer. The stepfather never pushed directly. He carried himself with quiet authority, careful patience. Yet I noticed the way his hand lingered on my son's shoulder, steady and grounding, as though anchoring him away from me. His gaze would meet mine briefly, and in those moments I felt the unspoken victory, calm, inevitable, final. Nights grew stranger. I began hearing footsteps outside my room long after everyone had gone to bed. Slow, deliberate, pausing just beyond the door. The air would grow colder, the floor creaking under weight that did not shift. I would lie rigid in bed, listening, waiting, praying the handle would not turn. And in the morning I would find faint marks on the floorboards, like someone had stood there for hours. One night I woke to find my bedroom door ajar. I know I had locked it. My heart thrashed as I scanned the shadows. Nothing moved, yet the air carried the faint scent of earth, damp and metallic. On my desk, the envelope had been shifted, its flap slightly open, as if someone had inspected the documents in my absence.